Welcome everyone to Through the Void Gate, a Warcaster podcast for new and experienced players. Deploying in 3.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Through the Void Gate, episode 13. I'm joined today by Spencer.
Hey.
And today we have a couple of special guests. We have Chief Creative Officer for Privateer Press, Mr. Matt Wilson, and the lead game designer for Warcaster, Jason Souls.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
So, for people that don't know, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your past work and kind of your role in developing Warcaster?
Sure. You want to go ahead, Jason?
Sure. I'm Jason Souls. I've been at Privateer since 2002 when I signed on to work with Matt on War Machine, and I worked on War Machine as the lead designer and developer for, I guess, 15, 16 years before I switched over to design Warcaster with Matt.
Yeah, I'm Matt Wilson. I was one of the founders of Privateer Press 21 years ago, and Jason and I have been working together, like you said, since 2002 on a lot more than just even War Machine, and we've done War Machine since then, but we've worked on the RPGs together, Riot Quest, and just about everything that we've done at Privateer for a long time. So we've sort of built out the Iron Kingdoms, and then at a certain point decided that we were ready to go off planet, and that's when we started working on Warcaster.
Speaking of the Iron Kingdoms, congrats on the killer Kickstarter for the IKRPG.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great campaign, and we're super excited to be getting back into the role-playing games.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to play.
Yeah, we're already planning on doing a game over Skype whenever it gets released.
Awesome.
Or Twitch. What inspired y'all to make Warcaster, and what were your initial goals in designing the game?
So Warcaster, it kind of had a long gestation period while we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with it. We knew that we wanted to create a new type of miniatures game experience, something that was that wasn't just a copy of War Machine. And we also wanted to introduce the idea of customization of the Warcaster, and that was really kind of the core goal in this, was to offer that opportunity, because it's something that has always been sort of, people have asked about it since War Machine launched, was like, could we make our own Warcaster? And in War Machine, there's not really a good way for us to do that and keep everything balanced. So that was where we headed into Warcaster, was specifically about the Warcaster, about customization, and sort of realizing that that desire to create your own identity in the game. For initially, we thought we were going to do it in War Machine. In the Iron Kingdoms. And so we went through a few different ideas where it was sort of an outgrowth of the current Iron Kingdom setting. And at a certain point, I don't remember exactly when it was, we decided that we just wanted to take things in a bit of a different direction. And at the same time, we were sort of spooling out the storyline that's going on in War Machine and the Iron Kingdoms, and realized that we were coming up to a really interesting point where we could sort of branch the storyline a little bit and create this new setting as an offshoot of the original, but also make it very distinct. So it wasn't just sort of a future of the Iron Kingdoms. And what that let us do was retain some of the DNA that we did want to keep in this new expression, this new game, which is effectively the concept of a Warcaster and big robots, because that's what we like to play with. So then we got into it, and we probably talked about it for what, Jason, like 3 years?
Yeah. On
concepted ideas.
Yeah, there was, as you said, a few different iterations of the game. spanning everything from like gangs of five fingers on through before we got to where we eventually ended up with. And ironically, soon after we started getting into the actual development of the game, we removed the Warcaster even from the tabletop. So considering it's sort of a exploration and meditation on the Warcaster, they're not even on the table.
Yeah, and that was a big move when we first started working on Warcaster, like in earnest, where we're creating rules and putting things on the tabletop. The Warcaster was a miniature in the game, and we realized a little ways into, after we'd had several playtest games, that the experience was better if that piece wasn't vulnerable. So that's when we decided that we'd remove the Warcaster from the actual battlefield and turn that role into more of a a battlefield commander from distance. And yet we wanted to keep a lot of the customization aspects of the rack, and we have even more things that we'll do in the future as we get into the campaign product that allow you to sort of create that identity of your Warcaster, or you as the Warcaster, with more types of customization.
Yeah,
That's
I'm super
really
excited
cool
for the campaign product.
Yeah, and it's cool to hear how it like developed organically too.
Yeah, everything goes through a lot of iteration, and testing. There's only so much you can sort of create before you have to start putting it into practice and seeing what works, and then it always changes invariably.
As someone that's like grown up on your products, because like I started playing War Machine when I was 16, so 14 years ago, seeing kind of how it ties into the original Iron Kingdoms but is so unique on its own, it gets me hyped from both angles. Like I'm excited for the stuff like the Kharchev armor that ties it to the Iron Kingdoms I know, but it's a completely different game that can stand by itself if you don't know those things.
Yeah, that was really the goal with it, was to make sure that it is distinct, and you don't have to have any sort of experience with the Iron Kingdoms to enjoy all of it. But if you are a veteran of the Iron Kingdoms, there's a lot of little things that we've sort of woven in, hidden in the setting, and that will get revealed in the future, that will definitely reward you if you have that sort of experience with the other games.
I've already seen people like digging up lore on the Iron Kingdoms to see what they can find to tie it to Warcaster, so that's kind of been fun in the community.
Awesome.
There's
Yeah.
definitely some Easter
And
eggs to go looking.
Yeah, well, the huge debate in the community right now is whether the Keepers are going to be a playable faction or not. And I know everyone is like, they're freaking out over it.
Yeah, we'll definitely be revealing more about the Keepers in the future. They're an important part. They won't be a faction though.
That's pretty much all we wanted to know.
But we've also said that before, so.
We knew you did, but there's been like rampant speculation about it, so we
No,
wanted to just get it like.
We've said that's not going to be a faction before, and then we.
Yeah, Hydos was never a faction.
I mean, come on, you guys know more than anyone that not everyone listens. They read what they want to read.
We don't listen.
Yeah, I've been devouring Warcaster stuff, and I've never found that. But like, they're in the faction section of the rule books. Everyone's like, are they a faction? Are they not a faction?
Yeah.
But can you guys speaking of factions, can you tell us a little bit about how you went about designing the initial factions and kind of what your design philosophy is for future factions?
Yeah. So when we started talking about the factions, we very much dug into the setting before we ever started thinking about rules, and we almost started to eliminate what we didn't like first when it came to the rules. There's War Machine's got such a strong background, and it echoes through the factions, and they're very much tied to the lore. And so we kind of needed, when we moved into Warcaster, to set aside a lot of our preconceived directions and the ground we've already tread before, and look for new avenues to explore. And that got us, and also, I mean, when you start thinking about moving from the geography of an area the size of Europe to the vastness of the Hyperuranion, I mean, the playground, the sandbox is just vast, and there's so much more you can do with it, and there's so many more considerations that instead of thinking about, hundreds of years of history and the Orgoth occupation rebellion as the touchstones for developing these societies, we jumped to the Exodus, and the sort of nation states isn't quite the right word when you're talking about galaxy spanning civilizations. But I mean, the strange thing is when we first started, we started the human civilizations, and they all basically came from the same root. And so we had to both think about, and jump in anytime here, Matt, we had to think about how they naturally function together and how they're opposed and how that shared history echoes through them, as well as setting up a war game and where it all falls apart, what their different directions are. So I feel like we very much started with the look and feel the factions before we ever started to develop anything like rules for them.
Yeah, the another sort of difference is from War Machine is when we developed War Machine, the Iron Kingdoms already existed because we had conceived of it in the role playing game products, and so we, even though through War Machine we ended up bringing a lot more detail, and as we explored the different nations that were the factions in that game. We were sort of building on top of the world that we had already created. With Warcaster, we really started with the concept of like the sort of the physics of the setting, right? And that Essence is this resource that the civilizations use, and that the planets are connected by these void gates through this Hyperuranion network. And we had all of that before we defined any of the factions, and then we started to look at how human civilization would spread out across the Hyperuranion once they were free to do so, and then how that would develop into long-standing civilizations.
The Empyreans were there from the start. They were obviously the architects behind the void gates, and so one of the things we did have to do is shake out the differences between the Convergence and what would be the Empyreans. And there was some baggage there. Matt saw the clearer vision before I did, and I tried to hold on to a little bit more of it, but I'm really happy with where we ended up with them as a truly alien, not human exploration of the Cirrus mythology.
Yeah, that's Spencer's faction and my bitter enemies.
The periods are so good.
Pretty hard.
Yeah. So y'all talked a little bit about how the concept of the Arcanescence really was defining for creating the factions and how they interact. On that theme, are we likely to see a Hordes version of Warcaster with factions that have a different resource management system?
That's not in the plans at the moment. Not in any way that would parallel Horde, like that would strike the same kind of parallel between War Machine and Hordes. We definitely have other things that we're going to introduce into the setting, and we're always looking for ways to tweak the rules so things work a little bit differently. But at this point, we have not talked about a completely different resource system.
Yep.
Okay. Similarly, in the Kickstarter 3 spoilers, you've mentioned cadres, which sound like mini themes a little bit. And we've seen some hints to the mini themes with the squad attachments and models like the Paladin Commander. Are theme forces something that we can look forward to in the future, or are you planning on letting the built-in synergies kind of drive list construction?
So you won't be seeing theme forces, and by won't, it's back to the rule of never say never, but we don't really have any plans to do theme forces in the frame of War Machine's theme forces. The cadres are more like package deals, and we're still working on them. So everything I say should be taken with a grain of salt. But the cadres are like package deals that you'll take for some number of your force composition slots, and they'll give you some number of models, and you'll fill out it's an option for helping to fill out your force. And whereas the models inside the cadre are themed together and they're made to operate together. There's not really a thought of a top-down, completely shaping your force to the exclusion of other models that your faction has access to at this time.
Each cadre is also sort of conceived around sort of a central unit that is sort of like we've shown a couple of these through Kickstarter updates. Like there's one that we just call the War Witch right now, but and in this piece of artwork you can see that there's this pretty huge like cybernetic witch for the Eternus Continuum, and then she's got 3 other sort of attendant witches, and then this crazy machine that doesn't have a name yet, and then a couple of these really big cyborg sort of guards, and that's the cadre. And when you are building your force, you could take any of those pieces except the witch and use it in your Eternus Continuum force. But if you want to bring the witch onto the table, you have to have the entire cadre as part of your force. So basically taking the whole cadre unlocks that model for you.
Okay.
That's
super cool. And I think I speak for everyone on the cast that as you guys spoil more of this cadre stuff, we are super excited.
Cool. Well, there's lots more to come.
So are we.
Yeah, well, that was actually my next question, because you talked about the AC cadre on the Charge and Spike episode. So do we have any more updates on the cadres in general or any of the other factions?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about them a little bit. Trying to think. We've shown a few things through the Kickstarter.
Yeah, there's been 3 ISA, 2 Marcher Worlds, 2 AC, and 0 Empyrean shown so far.
You want to give like a top level description of each of them, Jason? Bear in mind we haven't gotten to the point where we've given any of these things names yet. Names are usually one of the last things that we do when we finish these things off. It's kind of like almost like christening a ship. We do everything else, and then at the end we give it the name and send it off into the world. So everything like, you know, the witch, right? She's just right now the Great Witch or the War Witch when we're talking about her. Eventually she'll have some sort of unique title. But so we're sort of in a place where anything that we're describing for the future is a little clumsy to describe in some ways because it doesn't have a final identity.
Yeah,
or rules.
it's understandable.
We're a little ahead of the rules right now. Also, we're still ironing out all the concepts and working through that. I like to see what the models look like before I start writing rules for them, if possible.
Yeah.
So should I give you a quick overview of the cadres? The Iron Star Alliance has what we're calling at the moment a Witch Hunter cadre, and it's they're sort of anti-arcane strike force is another way of approaching them. They're specialists in countering the offensive magics of the opposition. So it's I think we ended up with a Witch Hunter Thurge as kind of the commander, and he's got his 3 much heavier paladin. Are they paladins, Matt? The Witch Hunters? I mean, I know they share the aesthetic, but
yeah, I mean, they would fit under the paladin sort of overarching theme.
So then they'll have a squad of 340mm models with them and a weird hound attachment, which some of the it's a sniffer. We mentioned them. Wow, did we mention them? We described them different roles for the Thurges internally, but now I'm saying this out loud. I'm not sure it actually has made it to print yet. But they're led by a human.
Yeah, this is all new to us.
Okay. So they have hound attachments that sniff out Arcanists on the tabletop. I mean, obviously we got to figure out what exactly that means, since you know where the Arcanists are one way or the other because you can see them. But they'll have a new Warjack with them and a little squad of drones that follow them around, and they'll be focused on anti-magic and counter-magic capabilities. And some real offensive strength. The Marcher Worlds are getting an air assault cadre. So it's got 2 squads with it, and they're ranger flyers, basically, with flying harnesses that pack slightly heavier weapons than we've seen the other rangers carrying. And they've got the second Marcher piloted vehicle is robotic exo harness with super heavy weapons. I believe we've finalized the name Storm Vulture for.
Yeah, that's a good name so far.
Yeah. I said that name out loud like 3 dozen times this week. I'm like, okay, all right, that's it. That's right.
Josh is in love with that model. He loves how chunky it is.
Let's see, the Empyreans actually, I think, ended up with my favorite cadre, which is, it's an Aeon cadre. We've been launching, we launched the Empyreans with very few Aeons with them because we focused on the rank and file robots. And because the vast numbers of them are just AI machines because the souls are too sacred to send into combat. So, but we wanted to get more unique characters in there. So we stopped and thought about it for a while. And the center of the cadre is a soul collector, something that can reharvest these divine Aeon souls to bring back to the great constellation at Ceres Prime. But once we locked down the ability to reclaim those souls, then the cadre took shape around them, and they're pretty fun. We got to explore some of the more alien aspects of the faction, and for instance, started looking at undersea life for inspiration for their upcoming Aeon Angel squads. I won't spoil too much of that because I think that we want to show off some of the artwork and let that speak for itself. But we'll be seeing the thousands of year-old heroes get their tabletop exploration coming up.
Oh man, my heart is all aflutter. I've been begging for an Empyrean version of a Beholder, but I think you just topped that.
That would be interesting.
Don't give this man more toys.
I already put it in Doug's head.
I got nothing to say on this matter. Next question. Can you walk us through a bit of your design philosophy when creating new models for the game? In particular, how are you handling the balance between the different factions?
So honestly, I feel like you've got 2 very different questions there, because when we start looking for new models, it's not usually driven by the rules. I mean, we'll talk about what the faction needs and what we want to see added to it, but the design philosophy for faction balance doesn't really touch the stage where we're adding models, where we're deciding what models to add to the game. That's partially aesthetics, partially how we want the story to go, partially business decisions, but it's not really a balanced rule decision until we actually have the model in hand. You want to add anything at that point?
I mean, most of what leads us as far as determining what new models we're going to make is just what toys do we want to play with. If we go, we need some vehicles on the table. That would be fun. All right, let's make a vehicle for every faction, and then and then we figure out the rules and the stuff later. But really, it's more of a creative and aesthetic decision early on about what we think is going to be cool, what we think people are going to like. And we sort of have always operated under the idea that we're our best customer. If we think something is cool enough for that we want to have it in our force on the table, then probably somebody else is going to like the idea as well. So we kind of just go with our creative instincts there. And then eventually the stuff gets into rules, and every once in a while something will change about a model, or we realize that our concept, the idea has kind of gone off the rails, like the Iron Star Alliance cadre that Jason was talking about with this sort of anti-arcane strike force. We went into it with some pretty wild ideas about what this Warjack was going to be like, and they just weren't working. At first we had the the Warjack had these drone launchers, and we had an idea that this thing was gonna fly in a certain way. And as we started to develop it visually, we realized that we just didn't really have a good baked idea for what this thing was supposed to do or look like. And so we kind of retreated and reset the idea a bit, and then attacked it again. And now it's working great. But generally the inception of a model comes from just of the creative side, and then like Jason said, we'll get into the rules, and once we put something on the tabletop, then we start to tune it so that it feels balanced.
Okay. I actually have a question specifically for you, Matt, because I can't remember if this is just a story going around in the community or what, but the story goes that you brought a Lego version of the scythe to work to pitch it.
I took a picture of it, yeah.
It was really helpful too. Everybody's like, oh.
Yeah, I had this idea for how the weapons would be mounted on it, and how on one side there would be a blade, and the other side would be the hard point where the ranged weapon would go. But I wanted that blade to be able to swing around the vehicle, so that it, it could attack physically from both sides. And I was doing a terrible job, I guess, describing it, and people weren't really understanding the concept. And so, yeah, I pulled out a box of Legos and built it real quick, and then took a picture. And after that, everybody understood the sort of the anatomy of the vehicle.
That's amazing.
That's
And
awesome.
that Lego model, I cited that thing directly in the rules as I was drafting them. And at one point, all of its maneuvers were centered around the ability of that thing to change its about the physics around its flight and its different maneuvers. I'm not incredibly articulate today. I apologize.
It's fine.
Great for you.
I had a question real quick, because when talking about the ISA cadre, you talked about a squad on 40mm bases, which sounds awesome. Is that the drones, or do we have another squad to look forward to?
No, that's the witch hunters themselves.
Yeah, there's some heavy armored guys.
Oh man, so like, I originally picked up ISA, and then I got Empyreans, and I was like, I'm happy with my little ISA skirmish force. But the third commander like has me wanting to buy more ISA by itself, and if we have a whole unit of these guys, oh man, they're gonna have me spending so much money.
Way to prey on the poor guy's rampant consumerism.
So y'all talked a little bit about how the models come first and then rules. So when designing the rules, what about looking at the balance between the different game sizes? Is the release of Pendulum being more geared towards skirmish influencing your design priorities at all?
So not so much. I think because of the way the dice mechanic functions and the you can't add something to the game so powerful that throws the balance out the window. I feel like we know what a human troop looks like, and we know what the far end of the spectrum, at least at present, looks like with the heavy warjacks. And the vehicles that we added, while they're potent and they add new aspects of play to the game, they're not offensively, say, more powerful than the heavy warjacks are. I think where we've only ran into a handful of issues where we really had to dial something for the sake of skirmish versus the full-scale game. One of the few examples that actually come to mind is when we were originally testing the game at the battle box level. The Immortal Weaver had stealth, and we decided that at the 4 to 8 unit range, that stealth on a model that would be that prevalent felt like it had the potential to stalemate things, or at least make it not fun to play out. So we removed stealth from the Immortal Weaver at that point, and that was a game scale development change. But there's not a whole lot of those. Yeah.
Okay. I was mostly asking just because like some of the factions, like particularly AC, like coming to mind, have like a lot of things that are really good on full size, like stealth and activation tokens and things of that nature, but seem to be lacking a little bit in like skirmish, just the offensive potential that some of the other factions can have. So I was wondering if it would be like, well, this faction has a whole bunch of awesome stuff for full size, so let's see what we can give them to help them out more on the skirmish side of things. So that's kind of where I was coming from.
I see what you're saying. When it comes to AC, the first thought that jumps to my head is just the word corrosion, and everything's more offensive with corrosion. So
That's fair.
But and the what's his name, the Marauder. That thing is I think pound for pound out of the battle boxes, that one is amazing for just about any scale of play. So I mean, maybe pack more Marauders in.
Fair.
I did see a guy talking about running as many as he could get his hands on, and then someone broke his heart and said you can only have 4.
Yep. There's
So-
a whole cadre on the way.
Yeah, there's some big guys in that cadre.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
I'm more excited for
the,
Kickstarter 3.
Yeah, I've been calling those guys the Temple Guard. So I don't know what their
Yeah.
final name's gonna be, but
It's not the wrong way to look at them, I guess.
Being an old school War Machine guy, I just called them Space Bastions.
That's also not bad.
So, you guys have mentioned that you recognize the turn advantage currently present in the game. What are some of the ways you guys have been looking at to address that?
So I don't really want to dig too much into it because every time I feel like I'm taking some steps down that direction, I second guess myself, or Travis Marg helps to second guess me. We're looking at it and we need to figure it out, but it's a heavily nuanced issue in that I don't want to be too heavy-handed with it. I've thought about things from staggered deployment so that one side starts slightly further up the field than the other. We've batted around some sort of early game arc benefit, but nothing's taken shape enough that I feel confident enough to throw out there and in any way stand behind it at this point. There is something there, but it's really hard to put your finger on, and it's really hard to figure out the light touch to fix it. Because if you start, that's one of those aspects of the game that if you don't address it thoroughly enough, it doesn't really feel like it does anything. And if you push too hard, the balance just swings the other direction.
There's also, I think, really a question of whether or not it needs to be addressed at all, right? Because there are advantages to going second as well, and in being able to react to what your opponent has done. But it's a known fact that with chess, right, the player playing white goes first, and it is a slight advantage, but it hasn't needed to be addressed for a couple thousand years. So we got time.
Amen.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's actually in particular the second player advantage that most people are concerned with in the pulse round scenarios.
The ability to
And the community's the ability to score and then contest so easily through things like displacement indexes or fulcrums or things like that without activation or just walking onto a point. So, and I understand where you're coming from with it being hard because the community's been spitballing things for months and no one's really found anything that sticks. So
Yeah, the second one Matt's saying, some days I feel like there's something that that almost is the right answer, and sometimes like, is this really a problem? But yeah, we're also actively talking about it.
awesome. That's all we wanted to know. Now on a similar vein, y'all have also stated that you're working on an errata/FAQ. So what are your goals for that document? And I'm sure what everyone really wants to know is, do we have an ETA?
I don't believe we have an ETA. We are actively working on it, and Can we mention anything about the campaign book, Matt?
I mean, yeah, we can talk a little bit about it. There's not a lot of specifics in terms of detail that we can give on it, but go for it.
So our intent right now is to present an updated version of the rules with that campaign book. So we'll be taking the errata and integrating it directly in there. So whereas I am not 100% certain we're going to have the errata document isn't really an errata document. It's a larger project than it sounds like at the moment. So I'm not say much more about that, but I will say that we're going to be integrating what we have gathered for it into that new rulebook. And it'll be a step forward. And that actually might be the first time that we see all the changes together if the errata is not complete by then.
We also have some online resources that are in development right now, and as soon as we can get them implemented, then that'll be a way that we are able to deliver updates.
Yeah,
That's super cool.
That's awesome to hear.
Are we going to see the unreleased ciphers and the cipher PDF reward from Kickstarter 2 before they ship, or are you guys saving that for a surprise once cards are in hand?
I'll be honest, I just hadn't even thought about it. So we've gone from that Kickstarter and the weekly updates with things into other projects and development for the future of Warcaster, and so it really hadn't crossed my mind that we could preview those. We could put them out in an update. There's nothing stopping us from doing that, but we're also so close to shipping the stuff that it may end up shipping first. So, but I hadn't even thought about putting it into an update yet. I suppose we should do that.
I mean, if you guys
Awesome.
wanted to give it to a podcast to preview.
I started counting down in my head to how long it was going to take for that question.
I can't even remember what we've shown or what we haven't yet with the ciphers. So I know we had a few, right, that we previewed through the Kickstarter campaign, but there's a whole bunch of other ones, and I think we added some as stretch goals as well. So
Yeah,
I
I
feel
think
like we should all maybe, but I'm not sure we've shown them their final form.
you showed the first set that was just coming in the Kickstarter, and then the first 4 that came from the first stretch goal. But then at the end of the Kickstarter, y'all said that because you talked to the distributors and it wouldn't cost much more, and y'all wanted to get the ciphers out, that there'd be another 8, I think, ciphers.
yeah, I think we added quite a few.
Yeah, and I know Jason previewed one in his AC outline, the one where you replace one of your vassal squad members with a solo, which is pretty cool. And then way back in the day, Travis previewed the one where the for ISA where it's an end of pulse round card that you put on a squad, and then at the beginning of your turn you bring back a squad member. I don't know if either of those or if that made it into the final cut, but
Both of those are in the final cut. I just realized as you were saying that I just assumed everybody already knew about those. I didn't realize I was actually previewing them.
Yeah, there's about 8 cards. Well, now 6 cards that we haven't seen yet.
Hey, so there is.
All right, we will have to figure out which ones those are and put them out there.
Also, I just want to commend you guys quick on the awesome articles for the faction overviews you guys have been putting out.
They've been a lot of fun to write,
Yeah,
and Matt and I spent a lot of time talking about them, and then I spend 3 to 5 days banging my head against a keyboard until something comes out.
I know they've got the community really hyped. They're big talking points every time one drops. So
Yeah, Jason did a fantastic job with those, and I'm really excited about the next ones to come.
I'm digging into the Marcher right now, and Marcher Worlds is basically all I'm thinking about this week. So it's made eating and sleeping interesting.
perfect. Those are my babies.
They've got Josh excited. So speaking of that, with shipping being imminent, possibly even by the time this this podcast comes out, I hope. What changes to the Kickstarter 2 model should we be looking forward to?
What changes to the Kickstarter 2 models?
Like from when we previewed them?
Yeah, so I mean, like between Kickstarter 1, the preview and the release, some things changes. Like the Striker Raptor got an extra speed, some weapons changed, the Morningstar got an armor debuff. So are we going to be looking forward to some things of that nature with the final cards?
There's probably a handful of changes, but it's mostly it mostly was a lot of wording and perfecting the language issues. There is a couple places where I know that Dr. Mira Hurst kind of had a counts as shadow arc ability, but we couldn't nail the writing for making her make the models around her count as being charged. So she ended up with and I think toward the end of the Kickstarter, I might have gotten a discussion where I spoiled that already, but she ended up with an ability that puts arc out on models, because what we realized is that anytime we tried to write an ability that gave a model the ability to be charged without actually putting arc on it, somebody shot a hole in it. So we can't have nice things.
Yeah, Mira is so strong. The current Mira, the old one was pretty strong too. And then I know Justin and I helped inspire the Fulcrum update. So
yeah, I by the end of the Kickstarter, I think all the balance changes were in place, and there might be a couple tweaks that we didn't actually vocalize at the time. But by the time the Kickstarter ended, we moved on to editing and refining the language more than a hard balance focus on anything.
We went to press pretty quick after the Kickstarter as well, so there wasn't. I mean, by the time we went into the Kickstarter, things were pretty big.
Yeah.
Okay. I know one of the questions people have been having is the native system lock on the Factotum and the Null Torpedo on Duchess. Do those apply just to Warjacks, or do they apply to any model that they hit?
Well, I will admit that my present insomnia has me digging up rules, because I do not remember that off the top of my head.
Okay. I mean, we'll find out in a couple weeks, so it's not a big deal. So there's nothing in the base rulebook that says it's just Warjacks. So that's where the question comes in.
Then it's probably not just Warjacks.
Cool.
I'm going to say I'm not going to answer rule questions right now. So.
No, that's fair.
That's fine.
That I'm just sitting here hoping. I was like, come on, give me a slight Empyrean nerf. That's all I want. I can't lose to Spencer much more. My ego won't take it.
Justin just wants the Factotum to be less tanky. That would make Justin very happy. Cool. So we've got a little bit more time than I expected. So I want to jump into some questions I had about scenario design. So what are some of y'all's design philosophies when designing scenarios, and how does that change between the competitive and narrative scenarios?
Okay. Well, I'll start with the second part because that's dead easy. When it comes to competitive scenarios, we have to make sure that there is balance and that one side doesn't have the edge over the other. When it comes to narrative, we get to stack the odds one way or the other, or to challenge one player over the other. And because in a narrative situation where obviously it's not made to be competitive, you can have situations that play out that aren't two very evenly matched forces approaching a symmetrically precise battlefield. Does that help?
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely seen that on the second scenario of First Contact. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like working on narrative scenarios, it frees us from a lot of the constraints of working with purely balanced competitive scenarios, and we get to exercise our creative legs a little bit more. While at the same time, I really like writing the balanced scenarios because they're sort of a pressure cooker where you're you're forced to continually think outside the box to create new and interesting scenarios while being forced by the constraints of the box when it comes to actual execution.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm really excited to see the new scenarios in Collision Course. I know you mentioned something about a new scenario that has like escape pods or something, and I'm really excited to see how that plays out on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was a fun one. It's the basic gist of it is that there's a disaster coming and you've got to rush over to collect the survivors. They might be scientists with valuable information. I don't recall exactly what the setup is, but you've got to go collect them and then rush them to I think it's a landing zone to get them off planet. And the fun part about that is that we have so many scenarios that surround squads that it gave us an opportunity to also spotlight vehicles. So the models that are picking up the units that are picking up the survivors are vehicles and squads.
Oh, that's so cool. I
Okay,
gotta say,
that's cool.
you guys have done a great job on the scenarios. We've been eating it up as you guys put it out. We did like a whole 2-hour cast on your scenarios, just deep diving into each of them.
Awesome, thank you. The campaign's going to give us a chance to really sit down and do some serious scenario writing, which I feel like it's an area that is, along with exploring the rest of the Hyperuranion, the scenarios for Warcaster are fertile ground for more exploration. I mean, not only do they let us throw out some a little bit of narrative fiction, but at the same time, they have such a dramatic influence on how play works that I feel like we just barely scratched the surface on what we can do there.
Okay, and are y'all looking to tie in the narrative events into the campaign module?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking.
So I know y'all talked about releasing, various narrative, events or modules like the first contact one. So I was wondering if you were planning on somehow tying those into the campaign module that y'all are releasing. I don't know how to phrase it different. Sorry.
I think it's a little early to say that exactly because I'm not certain of the shape of the campaign right now and how we might do a launch event for the campaign. I'm not sure how we work in too many outside events into the structure of that campaign because we don't know when people are going to be playing it. I don't know the scope of it exactly, so it's hard to say.
Project is still pretty much in a very nascent state. We've got a lot of different pieces that we're bringing together to put it together, but like I said before, we don't have a lot of specifics that we can talk about as far as the campaign product goes.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So-
Any idea on when the next narrative event is going to be released?
It'll probably follow about a year after the first one, so I guess that would probably be early summer, I would think.
Okay. Yeah, or fall.
We usually try and do those about like once a year with a new organized play update.
Awesome.
Man, so much content. How does game size affect the way you guys design scenarios?
Oh wow! It kind of defines exactly what the shape of the scenario can be. Like, not only does it modify the number of objectives that are possible, but it also, I mean, obviously determines the size of the table. And I don't feel like it tremendously influences the theme of the scenario. In fact, when we hit on a idea we like for a scenario, it usually inevitably gets translated into both a skirmish and a full-size game. Yeah, I guess that's what I'd say.
Okay. And what would you say, so the last question before we wrap up, what would you say some of the opportunities and limitations to the pulse round system has been when creating scenarios?
Wow. It's a hard question to answer because I'm so used to writing to that mechanism now that this is just, it's one of those memory checks. Okay, did I take this into account? Did I take this into account? Did I take this into account? And I haven't really considered what the game would look like outside the pulse round system, at least not since the second month of playtest before the game was ever spoken aloud to anybody outside the building.
I think one of the opportunities with the with the pulse round is that we can build in fairly complex narrative arcs to a scenario. Because we can time them to the pulses, or even down to the turns. And we've explored this a little bit, but that's something that I think we'll see a lot more as we get into the campaign. And we've sort of held back on the complexity of the scenarios so far, just to make sure that people aren't overwhelmed. But by the time we get into the campaign product and people have some experience with the game and really are more familiar with it, I think that we've got a lot of ideas that we want to throw into the scenarios that will, where you're playing through a story, and each one of these scenarios is gonna have that sort of like beginning, middle, and end of, in the way that a classic narrative would have.
Well said.
That's so cool.
That's awesome. So lots to look forward to is what I got out of that.
That's our driving goal.
So I think to close it out, the question we want to know the most is what excites you guys the most for the future of Warcaster? Go
for it, Jason.
Getting to see the world fleshed out. I honestly, I can't answer that question because I can't answer that question right now. It's a for the future. In retrospect, I'll say this is that thing I didn't say. I'll stop.
I'm definitely really excited about the campaign product and being able to dig into that and and tell some more story in the setting. You guys have seen some lore in the original rulebook and a little bit more in the expansion. The best stuff that we've have so far is these articles that Jason has written, and in some fashion that stuff will get folded into the book. But we keep calling it a campaign book or a campaign project or whatever, but really it's also going to be the setting resource, right, where we give you everything that you need to know about the Hyperuranion and the different factions, and also lay some groundwork for some new mysteries that are going to be revealed later on as well. And so it's a really, for us as the creators, it's a pretty fun time because everything's sort of new and still forming, and we get to we just get to run with these various creative impulses, and there's a lot of like head scratching too. Like we're working on some ideas that will become models in the future, and we have concepts of them, of what they would be like in the setting, what they would do, but now we've got to translate those into rules. And so that's a fun process in itself because there's a lot of like sort of puzzling and problem solving. But I think just getting to see this world kind of come to life through the artwork and the new miniatures, and to be doing something that is wholly new at the moment is pretty exciting.
I will say you guys are doing a great job of baiting the hook to keep us wanting more. Good. Every Warjack Wednesday, every like little snippet in the book, there's so much mystery with the world that speculation just runs rampant.
Yeah, it's we've woven a lot of things into the setting, even with the sort of light volume of material that we've published so far. There's a lot of little avenues to go down, and some that I think people haven't even realized yet. So, and that's sort of the fun of getting to publish a game that has a sort of an ongoing narrative, is that we get to tell a story and we get to spool it out there and have fun with it.
Well, thank you guys very much for taking the time to come on. I think it was a great interview. You guys gave us a lot to think about.
Thank you very much. This was it was a great time.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully we can
Much
have you guys
appreciated.
back in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We should talk after the next Kickstarter or before it.
All right, guys. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Essex Wargames. Now, if y'all enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe. Now, for more content, you can check out the Through the Void Gate blog, or join us on the Essex Wargames Facebook, Discord, and YouTube. Stay safe and roll super strikes.